The moment my brother's fiancée pointed at me across that dinner table and said, "She's the one who took it," I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not embarrassment, something colder and much more final than either of those things. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I own a private investment firm that manages just over $1.8 billion in assets. I have 43 employees, 3 offices, and a corner suite on the 14th floor of a building I also happen to own. I have been called, by people whose opinions actually matter to me, one of the sharpest financial minds of my generation. My family thinks I'm a bookkeeper for a small accounting office in Baltimore. This isn't something that happened by accident. I built that story deliberately, piece by piece, over 8 years. And I maintained it just as deliberately. Not because I was ashamed of what I'd built. Because I wanted to see, clearly, and without interference, who these people really were when they thought the money was somewhere else. I had my answer by the time I was 25, but I kept watching anyway. The way you keep pressing on a bruise just to confirm it still hurts. My brother, Daniel, is 2 years younger than me. He is charming in the particular way that only works on people who aren't paying close attention. He has a good smile and an easy laugh, and he has never, in his entire adult life, finished anything he started. My parents have always treated this as a quality, rather than a flaw. When Daniel dropped out of his MBA program, my mother called it a sign of his independence. When he burned through his inheritance advance in 14 months, my father said it showed he was a risk taker, just like the great entrepreneurs. When Daniel started working at a mid-sized financial consulting firm called Meridian Advisory Group 2 years ago, my parents threw him a dinner party and toasted to their son, the finance professional. Meridian Advisory Group is one of 7 companies in my portfolio. I have never told Daniel this. I have never told anyone in my family this. I watched my brother walk into a building I effectively own, sit down at a desk funded in part by my capital, and take a salary that my investment indirectly supports, and I said nothing. I just watched, and I waited. The engagement party was my sister-in-law-to-be's idea. Her name is Vanessa, and from the moment Daniel introduced her to our parents 18 months ago, she has been conducting a very careful audition for the role of favorite child-in-law. She is precise about money in the way that people are precise when they didn't grow up with enough of it and are terrified of returning to that state. She researched my parents thoroughly before the first dinner. I know this because she made several small, specific references to things she couldn't have known from a single conversation: my father's college roommate's name, my mother's preference for a particular French perfume that isn't widely sold anymore. Vanessa does her homework. She just hadn't done it on me. The party was held at my parents' house in Chevy Chase. Big colonial, flagstone driveway. The kind of house that announces a certain kind of success without being vulgar about it. My parents bought it in 1994 and have spent the subsequent 3 decades treating it like a monument to their own good judgment. I arrived in my second car. I keep a 2019 Honda Accord specifically for visits home. My actual car, the one I drive to the office and to client dinners and to the kinds of restaurants where the bill arrives without numbers, stays in my parking garage in the city. I wore a blazer from Target over a blouse I'd had for 4 years. I carry a specific handbag when I visit my family. It is a perfectly nice handbag from a brand that is perfectly unremarkable. These are not small decisions. These are the costume I have been wearing since I was 23 years old, and I have worn it so long it fits like skin. My mother met me at the door with the specific smile she reserves for me, warm enough to be presentable, slightly diluted compared to the one she'd had on her face 30 seconds earlier. "Claire, honey, you made it." She hugged me briefly. "Did you have trouble parking?" "No trouble," I said, "because there's a spot down on Elmwood if the street is full." "Mom, I found a spot. I'm here." She patted my arm and moved back toward the living room, toward Daniel and Vanessa, and the cluster of Vanessa's family, and the colleagues of my father's who had been deemed important enough to witness this milestone. I stood in the foyer for a moment and looked at the framed photos on the wall. Daniel's college graduation. Daniel, in front of the Meridian building on his first day. Daniel and Vanessa at some beach somewhere, both laughing at something just outside the frame. In the corner, nearly behind the coat rack, there was a photo of me, at my own college graduation. I was 22 in that photo, and I was already running 2 investment accounts, and had just signed my first outside client. I remember exactly what I was thinking about in that photo. I was thinking about a specific bond structure I'd been stress testing all week. I am not smiling. I never smile in photos when I'm thinking about something interesting. The party was catered, which I thought was a bit much for an engagement dinner at someone's home, but Vanessa has a sense of occasion. There were about 30 people in the house, and within the first 20 minutes, I had been introduced to several of them, as Daniel's older sister, with the particular vocal inflection my parents use when they say older, that somehow manages to imply both well-meaning and lesser than simultaneously. One of Vanessa's aunts asked me what I did, and I said bookkeeping, and she nodded with the polite smile people give when they've decided you're not someone who needs further conversation investment. I smiled back and took a sip of my sparkling water. I have had this exact exchange approximately 200 times in 8 years. Vanessa gave a toast. It was well written and specific, and hit every emotional note with the precision of someone who had drafted and revised it. She talked about Daniel's ambition. She talked about the way he had risen at Meridian. She talked about their future together, the home they were going to build, the family they were going to start, the life that was going to be, by any reasonable measure, exceptional. Everyone applauded. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father gripped Daniel's shoulder. I applauded. I had a specific relationship to the word exceptional, and it was not the one Vanessa was using. After the toast, dinner was served in stages, and I found myself seated at the far end of the table, not quite the children's table, but the end that catches neither the good light nor the main conversation. Vanessa's college friends were at my end, which meant I spent 40 minutes being peripheral to a conversation about a couple neither Daniel nor I knew, who were apparently getting divorced in a manner everyone found both scandalous and richly deserved. I listened. I am very good at listening. It was during dessert that the evening changed direction. Vanessa's mother, a thin, precise woman named Patricia, who wore her composure like body armor, excused herself from the table. A few minutes later, I heard her voice from the hallway, and it had a different quality than it had during dinner, lower, tighter, with a specific tension underneath it that I recognized immediately, because I have spent my career in rooms where money is suddenly in question. Patricia came back to the doorway. She said, very carefully, "I'm sorry to interrupt. Has anyone seen the bracelet I left on the vanity in the guest bathroom?" The room did that particular thing rooms do. When something goes wrong at a party, conversations stopped at slightly different times, like dominoes falling in slow motion, until there was a silence that was almost complete. "A bracelet," my mother said. "I set it on the vanity before dinner. I didn't want to wear it during the meal. I always take it off when I eat. I've done it my whole life. It's a yellow gold cuff, Art Deco setting, sapphires." She paused. "It was my mother's. It's not replaceable." Everyone made the appropriate sounds. Several people got up to help look. There was a brief and thorough search of the guest bathroom, the hallway, the surfaces near the sink. I stayed in my seat. I knew the bracelet wasn't going to be found in the bathroom. I knew this because of something I had noticed 30 minutes earlier that I hadn't thought much of at the time, and was now thinking about very carefully. The search extended. Daniel helped. My father helped. Vanessa stood near her mother with her hand on Patricia's arm, wearing an expression of focused concern that was, I thought, slightly too composed for the situation. I watched the room. I watched the faces. I do this professionally. I watch people when they think they aren't being watched, and I read what the face says when the voice is saying something different. Then Vanessa looked at me. It wasn't an accusatory look yet. It was the look that comes just before that, the look where someone has already made up their mind and is now simply deciding how to announce it. I have seen this look in boardrooms. I have seen it from people who were wrong about where the risk was sitting. I set down my fork. "Claire," Vanessa said, "did you use the guest bathroom before dinner?" "I used the hall bathroom," I said. "The one by the back stairs." "Are you sure?" "Yes." She tilted her head. It was a very small movement, and a very large statement. "It's just that a few people saw you in that part of the hallway earlier." "I was getting my jacket from the coat closet," I said, "which is also in that part of the hallway." "Right." She said it the way people say right when they mean they don't believe you but haven't committed to saying so directly yet. My mother was looking at me with an expression I had seen before. It was the expression she wore when she was hoping I wouldn't do something to complicate an already complicated moment. I wasn't sure what she imagined I might do, but the hope was clearly that I would do less of it. "Vanessa," Daniel said, gently, with the smile he uses when he's managing a situation rather than participating in it. "I'm sure nobody at this table took anything. Let's just keep looking." "I'm not accusing anyone," Vanessa said, in the tone people use when they are, in fact, accusing someone. "I'm just trying to understand what happened." Patricia had said nothing during this exchange. She was watching me too. Her expression was different from her daughter's, less theatrical, more certain, as if she had already run the calculation and arrived at an answer she was satisfied with. Here is what I had noticed earlier. Here is what I had filed away and not yet used. At approximately 7:45, while most of the guests were in the living room for pre-dinner drinks, I had walked to the coat closet at the end of the main hallway. As I approached, I saw the door to the guest bathroom was slightly open. Through that opening, I saw Vanessa. She was standing at the vanity. She was not washing her hands. She was holding something and putting it somewhere interior, somewhere contained, somewhere that wasn't the vanity surface. Then she noticed the angle of the door, glanced toward the hall, and I had already turned and continued to the coat closet as though I'd seen nothing. I hadn't thought about it at the time. I had filed it somewhere in the back of my mind under things that might become relevant and moved on. I have a very organized mind. Nothing is ever actually lost in there. It's just waiting. Now I looked at Vanessa across the dinner table. I looked at Patricia. I looked at my mother, whose expression was tightening with the particular anxiety of someone who is hoping that when the storm comes, it passes quickly. "I didn't take the bracelet," I said. "I believe you," my mother said, very quickly, in the voice she uses when she's hoping to end a topic rather than actually addressing it. "I'm not sure I do," Patricia said. The room went very still. "I want to pause here and tell you something about that moment," I have been in rooms where a lot was at stake, rooms where careers ended, where mergers collapsed, where people I'd trusted said things that fundamentally reordered my understanding of who they were. I have learned, over years of being in those rooms, that the instinct to defend yourself immediately is almost always the wrong choice. Not because the defense wouldn't work, because silence is a more powerful instrument than explanation, in the hands of someone who knows what's coming next. I said nothing. I looked at Patricia, and I let the silence do what silence does. My mother's bracelet is not a small thing, Patricia said. It's worth something, and I left it somewhere specific, and now it isn't there. Then we should keep looking, I said. I hope you find it. My voice was very even. I have practiced this voice for years. It does not waver, and it does not apologize, and it does not ask permission to exist in the room. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't used to that voice from someone she'd already decided didn't matter. Daniel broke the silence. He laughed the easy laugh and said something about maybe the clasp had come undone and it had fallen somewhere. And the room accepted this possibility, with the relief of people who very much want a reason to step back from a cliff. Conversations restarted. I finished my dessert, but I had made a decision. After the dinner plates were cleared, people moved to the living room for coffee. I excused myself and walked to the hallway, and I stood near the coat closet, and I did what I am professionally trained to do. I looked at the situation without sentiment, and I thought about what my options were, and what each one would cost, and what each one would produce. Option 1 was to say nothing, go home, and let it dissolve into the permanent silt of things that almost happened at family events. This had a certain appeal. I have been choosing this option, in one form or another, for 8 years. Option 2 was to tell them what I had seen, to describe what Vanessa had been doing in the bathroom, to let them decide what it meant, to introduce doubt into a narrative that had already been arranged without my input. This had the disadvantage of being my word against hers, and in this particular room, I already knew whose word would be weighted more heavily. Option 3 required something I had not used in this house before, something I had been carrying for 8 years in a quiet place in my chest, neither displaying it nor discarding it, just keeping it ready, like a document in a file, waiting for the right meeting. I thought about my brother in the building I owned. I thought about my name on the organizational structure chart of the company that sat above Meridian Advisory Group in my portfolio. I thought about the quarterly reports I had signed, the capital I had committed, the decision I had made 2 years ago when Meridian came to my attention through a sourcing contact, and the decision I had made, without sentimentality or hesitation, to invest because the numbers were sound, not because my brother worked there. I hadn't known he worked there when I first reviewed the prospectus. By the time I found out, the investment was already structured, and the logic was already solid, and I don't make decisions based on sentiment. I took out my phone. I made 2 calls. The first was to my assistant, who has a very good memory for logistics. The second was to my attorney, who has been retained for exactly the kinds of situations that require a very good memory for organizational structure. Then I went back to the living room. I poured myself a cup of coffee, and I stood near the fireplace and I watched the room. My mother was laughing at something Vanessa's aunt had said. My father was talking to one of his colleagues about a renovation project. Daniel was beside Vanessa with his arm around her, and she was smiling, the specific smile of someone who has completed a task and is satisfied with the result. I waited for the room to settle. Then I said, "Vanessa, I owe you an apology." She turned. Everyone in the immediate vicinity turned. My mother's expression went through 3 distinct phases in approximately 1 second. "I shouldn't have been so defensive earlier," I said. "You were asking a reasonable question and I wasn't very gracious about it." Vanessa relaxed. I watched it happen, the shoulders, the jaw, the recalibration of her expression, from defended to magnanimous. "I appreciate that," she said. "I wasn't trying to accuse anyone. I'm just very worried about that bracelet." "Of course," I said. "It was your grandmother's. I understand completely." I paused. "I think you should check your evening bag." The silence was different this time, sharper. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said. "Your evening bag. The beaded one you had in the living room before dinner." I said this, with no particular inflection. Factual. The way I present information in meetings. "I think you should check it. I believe the bracelet may have been moved there accidentally." The word accidentally was doing a specific kind of work in that sentence, and everyone in the room with any sophistication about language understood exactly what kind. Vanessa's composure held for about 3 seconds. I watched her do the calculation whether to refuse, whether to make a scene, whether to turn this into something else entirely. Her mother was watching her now too, I noticed, with the same careful attention that Vanessa usually directed outward. "That's a very specific suggestion," Vanessa said. "I have a specific reason for making it," I said. Daniel looked between us. His easy smile was absent for the first time all evening. "What's going on?" "I'm just suggesting your fiancé check her bag," I said. "If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and I'll apologize to this whole room. If I'm right, then we've found Patricia's bracelet." I looked at Patricia, who had gone very still in the armchair near the window, which is what we all want. No one moved for a moment. Then Patricia said, quietly. Vanessa. Something in her tone was different than it had been all evening. Earlier, Patricia's voice had carried the confidence of someone executing a plan. Now it carried something else. Doubt. Maybe. Or the beginning of a question she hadn't finished forming yet. Vanessa looked at her mother. Whatever passed between them in that look was fast and dense and entirely outside my ability to read, because some conversations have been going on for decades before you walk into the room. Then Vanessa picked up the beaded bag from the side table, where it had been sitting all evening, and she opened it, and she took out the bracelet, and she set it on the coffee table. She did not say anything. She looked at the bracelet and she did not say anything. Vanessa, Daniel said. His voice had changed in a way I had never heard from him before. Something structural had shifted. It must have fallen in, she said. I must have knocked it off the vanity somehow, and it landed in my bag, and I didn't notice. She said this, looking at the bracelet, and not at anyone's face. That's clearly what happened. The room received this explanation in silence. My mother said, softly, I'm sure that's exactly what happened. She looked at me when she said this. Her expression was very complicated. There was relief in it, and love, and the specific pain of someone who has just seen something they weren't ready to see. But underneath all of that, I could also see something else. Something that looked very much like she had been waiting, quietly, for a very long time, to be standing on the right side of a moment like this. Patricia crossed the room and picked up the bracelet. She held it in her palm and looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, Thank you, Claire. Of course, I said. I put down my coffee cup. I said I had an early morning, and I thanked my parents for a lovely evening. I hugged my mother, and she held on a beat longer than usual, and she said quietly into my shoulder, Drive safe, honey. I shook my father's hand. I looked at Daniel, and he looked at me, and his easy smile was nowhere to be found. He looked, for the first time in a long time, like someone who was genuinely paying attention. I'll call you this week, I said. He nodded. I said goodnight to the room. I picked up my coat from the closet, the same hallway, and I walked out to my Honda Accord, and I drove back to the city. On the way home, I called my assistant and asked him to pull the Meridian files for the following morning. I asked him to also prepare a summary of the parent company structure, specifically, the documentation that showed the ownership chain from my holding company down through the subsidiary that held the Meridian stake. I asked him to have it ready before my 9 o'clock. He asked if something was happening. I told him not yet. Here is what happened over the following 3 weeks. Daniel called me 4 days after the party. He was using the voice he uses when the easy charm has been set aside and something real is trying to come through. He asked me what I knew. I told him what I had seen in the hallway. He was quiet for a long time. He asked why I hadn't said anything earlier. Not that night. Not any of the other nights that things had happened over the years. I told him there was a difference between knowing something and it being the right time to act on it. He asked how I always knew when the right time was. I told him that was the only skill I'd ever really worked hard to develop. The engagement did not survive the following 2 weeks. I don't know the details of how it ended, because it's not my relationship, and Daniel is private about things that actually matter to him. What I know is that Vanessa's employment at her current firm, a financial consultancy that, it turned out, had overlapping client relationships with Meridian, became complicated in ways that were not directly engineered by me but were also not entirely accidental. My attorney filed paperwork that clarified, for the first time in any formal way, the ownership structure above Meridian. Daniel learned, in a meeting with his managing director that I did not attend and was not present for but was informed about afterward, that his firm operated within a portfolio controlled by a private investment company. He learned the name of that company. He is smart enough to have done the research that followed. He called me on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the party. He said my name and then he didn't say anything else for a while. I know, I said. How long? The Meridian investment is about 2 years old. The holding structure above it is about 6 years old. And before that, different companies, different structures, the same general approach. He exhaled. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about how to answer this. I thought about the photos in the hallway, and the graduation dinner, and the toast where Vanessa described his exceptional future, and the 8 years of a particular smile that was warm enough to be presentable but slightly diluted. I thought about how to explain to someone that you love them, and that love and honesty are not always in alignment, and sometimes you need years of information before you can trust yourself to know which one to lead with. Because I needed to understand who everyone was first, I said, before I became something different to them. He was quiet. I'm still the same person I was at that dinner table, I said. I have been the same person the entire time. That's the whole point, Daniel said. You let me think I was doing something. Building something. You never said. You are doing something, I said. Your numbers at Meridian are good. Your client retention is above the division average. I've read your performance reviews. You didn't get there because of me. You got there because you actually showed up and did the work. I paused. I just made sure the door was open. What you did once you walked through it was entirely yours. He didn't say anything for a long time after that. Eventually he said, The firm. Does anyone there know? No one at the operating level, I said. It's not relevant to how they run their business day to day. And it won't become relevant unless I decide it needs to. And you decide those things. I decide those things, I said. Another silence. Mom and Dad, he said. I'll tell them when it feels right, I said. In the same way I told you. When there's a reason to, and not before. Is there anything else I don't know? He asked. And I could hear in the question that he was genuinely asking, not as a challenge, not as an accusation, but with the real openness of someone who has just had to revise a very large portion of what they thought they understood about the world. Probably, I said. But the things you don't know aren't secrets kept against you. They're just things that haven't come up yet. He laughed. It was a different laugh than the easy one, smaller, quieter, more real. That's such a you answer, he said. I know, I said. We talked for another hour. About Meridian. About the industry. About some of the thinking behind the investment strategy I'd built over the past decade. He asked real questions and I gave real answers, and it was the most honest conversation we had ever had. Which is a strange thing to say about a conversation that started because of a lie that had lasted 8 years. But sometimes honesty needs a long runway. Before we hung up, he said, I don't know whether to be angry with you. You can be angry with me, I said. It's a reasonable response. I think I'm mostly just, he stopped. Started again. I think I spent a long time being the successful one. In my head. And now I'm recalculating. The recalculation isn't a punishment, I said. It's just new information. That's all it ever is. He thought about that. When did you get so smart? I've always been this smart, I said. You just had me filed under the wrong category. The laugh again. Quieter. Yeah, he said. I think I did. My mother called me the following Saturday morning. Not about any of this. She didn't know about any of this yet. She called because she'd found a recipe for a cake I'd loved when I was a child, and she was thinking about making it for no particular reason. We talked for 40 minutes about the cake and about a book she was reading and about whether the weather was going to turn early this year. I did not tell her about the investment firm, or the Meridian structure, or what I had watched her do with her smile over the past 8 years. I just talked to her about cake. There will be a right time for the rest of it. I'm patient. I have always been patient. In their version of me, I was the quiet one, the practical one, the daughter who had chosen a modest life and a sensible job and who showed up to family events in a reliable car and asked for nothing exceptional. In their version, I was the comparison that made the other story shine brighter. In mine, I was just watching, taking notes, building something in the time they had decided I wasn't worth watching back. I drove to the office on Monday morning in my actual car. I parked in my actual spot, in the garage beneath the building I own. I rode the elevator to the 14th floor and walked into my corner office and stood at the window for a minute, the way I do every morning, looking at the city below. 43 employees, 3 offices, $1.8 billion, give or take. No one had given it to me. No one had believed it into existence on my behalf. No toast had been raised to it at a party in Chevy Chase. I built it the way you build anything, real quietly, carefully, in the time other people were looking somewhere else. I sat down at my desk and opened the Meridian file and got to work.